Good morning, respected Mr. Anil Rajdan, Session Chair, my co-speaker, Mr. Ashish Bhandari, Chanpreet Sani ji, distinguished guests, and delegates, young professionals. The topic for today's sessions is the Internet of Things and Big Data, relatively a new topic for oil and gas industry. I am thankful to the organizer of the 8th World PetroCoal Congress for giving me this opportunity. And the theme of the session itself is a more apt, the petroleum, coal and gas, which is significantly contributing towards the commercial energy for the development of various countries and cleaner options for a green planet. I'm basically from a E&P industry and I have around 4 decades of experience in E&P industry. Every time a new technology is coming, it is giving a boost to this industry. And as you know that oil and gas industry is a high-tech industry, it's a capital-intensive industry. And data is most important thing in this industry, as pointed out by Mr. Rajdan. The interpretation of the data by various experts and the orientation of the data is a new thing, and it gives a leads for revolutionary ideas, and various technologies are developed over these in this industry, and this has given a boost to this industry. The today's topic, Internet of Things and the big data, it's a basically, as you know, that it's a digital India and digital world, and in this digital world, the importance of this data is more important than any other data. When we are talking of Internet of Things, the content of this, my talk will cover what is Internet of Things, what is big data, how it is relevant for the oil and gas industry, what is the potential for this big data in oil and gas industry, and how it can reduce the cost, improve the production, improve the recovery, and other things for making the profitable business. The linkages of this big data along with this oil industry, and some concluding thoughts. As you know that Internet of Things is a system of interrelated computing devices, mechanical and digital machines, objects, animals, people that are provided with unique identifiers where you can identify the things, and the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human to human or the human to machine interaction or the computer interaction. This is basically a Internet of Things. The examples are anything or everything, right from the car, the light, the thermostat, the refrigerator, your mobile phone, your appliances, everything can be used for this Internet of Things. As per Gartner Incorporation, the number of interconnected devices as on date has already crossed 6.4 billions and is likely to go to 13.5 billions in coming two years. So that is a devices which can utilize this data, which is known as the Internet data. How it works? It starts with the RFID, which is the radio frequency identifications. It senses the change in the physical things. It senses the change in the physical state of a matter. And smart tech, it plays and process and interpret the data. And finally, through nanotechnology, it can detect even a small change behavior or the different potentials of these things, and ultimately right from it goes to the network and through cloud, and it can come to your mobile also, which is presently most of us are using. Coming to the big data, the first definition of big data was developed by Meta Group as a part of Gartner. They describe the big data into 3 V's, that is the velocity, volume, and variety. As you know, these are the 3 V's which form a base for the big data. The volume of data generated, as you might have seen in last around 2 decades after the revolution of the mobile itself, how we are interacting daily, we are interacting, large number of people interacting with the mobiles, and this data is generated. And right from not in a structured way, in some time unstructured way. The data you generate, you like some photo, it's a data generation. you dislike some photo, it's a data generation. And how to compute this data, how to arrange this data, that is a problem, and that data is a thing which can use in the big data thing. After this 3V, the IBM have added the fourth V, which is the veracity or the quality of the data, and the other things in the 3Vs, that is the fourth V. And Oracle have added the fifth value, that is the generation of value from this data. So ultimately the big data is a 5V: volume, velocity, variety, veracity, and the value itself. So combining these things, and each things are important, whether it's a velocity, that's a online data, it's a how fast we are generating this data, the variety of data, in a variety of data, whether it's a structured data or a unstructured data or a semi-structured data. So the different sources, the data is generated by various sources, and these sources are not connected with each other sometimes. So the data generated needs to be unified and integrated. The value, again, data creates the value. And once the value generated by this data is useful for any industry or including the oil and gas industry. The veracity is the quality check. The data should be validated, and then once it is validated, then only it should be useful. Some of the data are useful for this some purpose, and some of the data are not useful for some purpose. So to find out the veracity is also an important aspect for the big data. And finally, as you know, the volume generated by these data, by these devices, by the interconnected devices is so large that initially we were talking of a 1 GB, 2 GB and other things, but now we are talking on a tetra and penta GBs and all that. So the volume generated, and to handle this is basically a big data, use of big data. The definition of big data is it's a technologies, describe a new generation of technologies and architecture to economically extract value from very large volume of a wide variety of data by enabling high velocity. The time factor is also important. If the data required is today, it should be required today, it should be generated today itself. So the time and the capture and discovery and the analysis of the data. Again, as you might be knowing that the feelings of the person cannot be analyzed, cannot be carry out an analysis, a subjective or an objective analysis. And while ensuring their veracity, the variety of data, the veracity of data is also important for that particular point of view. Until unless data is authentic, the decision makers or the value generated from this cannot be utilized for that particular purpose. And there should be automatically quality control through which this data check should be there, so that the data used are perfect, validated, and that whatever value we have created, whatever the decisions we are taking based on this data are correct to our knowledge. For oil and gas industry, as you might be knowing that the oil and gas industry is a capital intensive, it's a high-tech industry, and in oil and gas industry we take the decisions in uncertainties. That is the biggest difference between the oil and gas industry or any heavy industry. And when you are taking a decision, capital intensive decisions of crores of rupees and in uncertainties, at that particular point, data, value of data is more important. And as you might be knowing that each decisions in oil and gas industry, first time, it should be first time right. In spite of the fact that you might have seen in the exploration, even as on of date, when we are drilling 3 wells, 1 well is hydrocarbon bearing, 2 wells are not hydrocarbon bearing. And in development, we try our level best to be 100% sure to make the investment. And investment is so huge that we cannot avoid the use of the data and all that. 1 well can cost in India itself, 1 well can cost around millions of dollars, $150 million. One ONGC that our company have drilled 1 well in deep water offshore, $150 million, 1 well cost. So these are the costs of the huge costs are involved, and that's why the data generated and the use of this data is very important for oil and gas industry. The data generated in oil industry is again grows very fast. Each well, the data, what the sensor we are putting, what are the in the facilities we are putting the various sensor, and the data generated by these wells and facilities are to be corroborated. The sources are different. The data sometimes can be structured, they sometimes can be unstructured or the semi-structured from various devices, and these data needs to be unified in a manner so that a value, economic value can be generated from this particular data. And you might be knowing right from the first phase of the exploration, that is the seismic, huge amount of data are generated through raw seismic data. We carry out the processing, we carry out the interpretation, and ultimately this data is useful for finding the oil. The structured data in most of the cases are handled in a systematic way, and most of the time, whether it's a reservoir simulation or the modeling or the 3D seismic, we use this structured data in a good fashion, and the software, softwares are available in the industry. But to tackle the semi-structured or the unstructured data, that the Excel sheet data, that is most important, and where the big data is involved for getting and these into one platform. To support the real-time decision making, oil and gas company need these tools and to integrate and synthesize diverse data source into a unified whole. So ultimately, by the analysis of all the data, we need one solution, and that solution should be validated with the data itself. If data is not validated, the veracity is not there, then definitely the value, economic value cannot be generated from this data. It is possible to derive insight from the relationship that will surface when all these sources are processed as a whole. But to unlock the value, oil and gas company need assess at the appropriate technology, tools and expertise. Right in the morning that our Honorable Minister have told about our skill. So how many people, how many in the oil industries are there who knows the skill? So developing a skills, if skills are not there, knowledge and skills are not there, definitely data is not useful. Data is useful only when it is a properly technologies are there, proper skill is there, and then only we can generate the economic value from this. If you talk of the oil industry, the volume is huge. As you might be knowing that in oil industry, daily the data generated are so huge that most of the storage facility which we have are insufficient to generate this data. The variety of data, as I have already told you, the structured data is easy to put. The unstructured data, the semi-structured data are again difficult to bring to one platform. In oil industry, the value or the velocity, as I have told you, the real-time data, like we are dealing well, the LWD data, the MWD data, these are the real-time data. And these data needs to be seen at that time itself. If we are dealing a well, a horizontal well, the data which is coming needs to be, the decision needs to be taken at that particular moment itself. We don't want a data that don't want a postmortem of the well. We want that this particular well, if it is going in the right direction or not. So the data is online data, and that data needs to be seen in that technology, and a skilled person should be there to take the decision there itself. The value, as I have told you, this oil and gas industry is a capital intensive industry, huge amount is involved, and once this, for enhancing the production, for discovering the oil, and ultimately to reducing the cost. So the use of big data for deriving the economic value and ultimately to reduce the cost of exploration and development is actually the theme of this particular data. And we are taking the decision in uncertainties, as I already told you. So basically what we are doing, the mapping the uncertainties, quantifying the uncertainties, and then taking the decision. It doesn't mean that there is no uncertainty. Even if we are taking a decisions, there are uncertainties, inherent uncertainties involved in the Mother Earth as well as the complexity, geological complexities. But still we have to take the decisions. But that decision should be based on the interpretation of the available data, and big data can helpful in taking these decisions. The data quality, as I told you, that validation of the data, large amount of data is generated. All the data is not important for all the decisions. So right data is required for taking the right decisions, and we must know what data is required for taking the right decisions. Coming to the oil industry, as you might be knowing that exploration, there are 3 phases. In each phase, whether it's the exploration or the development or the creating the facilities, each stage data is important. Exploration, there is an uncertainty, whereas in development, the uncertainty level has reduced, and ultimately we are for the business, we are for the monetizing the whatever we have spent in the exploration. And in engineering also, when we are making the facilities, we have to make optimum facilities. Neither should be the surplus facility, nor should be that we incurred a cost at a later date to handle the liquid and oil and gas. So basically, on big data analytics can help the oil industry, but this still is at the infant stage in the oil industry. Although this big data we are talking is a 21st century concept and coming to the software industry and other service providers, but like company like Halliburton, Schlumberger and other these companies, but still it has to come to E&P companies so that we can utilize this data, because service providers are helping the E&P companies basically to reduce the cost, to bring the technologies, right technology. If we give the right information to the service provider, then only they can bring the right technology. Otherwise, technologies implementations will not help the E&P companies to perform in a better way. The data acquisition, each stage in the oil industry, whether it's a data acquisition, the data management, the seismic processing, the visual interpretation, the modeling, reservoir simulation, modeling, the log analysis. As you know that log data is again basically a raw data. Then you have to process this data. Sometimes it's not in a structured fashion. So these data needs to be processed again with a subjective way, and then property modeling, and ultimately taking the decision on a capital investment decision based on the simulation study and the prediction. So that's why this data is most important for the oil industry, and ultimately then only we can get the value from this data. The potential for big data in oil industry, as you know, oil, right from the finding the oil, when we are finding the oil, we are collecting large amount of data from 5,000 to around 35,000 feet below the earth crust, and this data we are again correlating the data, interpreting the data, processing the data, and again when we are making the production data, when we are monetizing these assets which we are finding through the exploration phase, it's very expensive to produce the oil, and once the cost incurred in the expenditure incurred during this phase of a development stage, we must get the benefit out of it. And you might be knowing that in spite of these uncertainties, the use of data and the skill manpower, the oil industry is still making huge profit. Basically, it's a big risk, and if the decisions are good, then only these companies can make a huge profits. Dealing, as you might be knowing, the correlation of the data throughout the world has helped in dealing, and whatever technologies have developed in last 4 decades, whether it's a horizontal well, multilateral well, or the hydrofracturing, etc., these are the technologies which have generated during last 3 to 4 decades, and it has helped us, the oil industry, in improving the oil production, improving the recovery factor, and ultimately helped in making the economy of most of the countries in a better manner. Most of the companies, the 20,000 companies working, they need a data analyst. And as you might be knowing, in addition to the geologist, geophysicist, reservoir engineer, petrophysicist, the oil industry needs a data scientist. So this is a high time that young generation should develop this skill of handling the data and putting this data to the right place and making out the economic value of this data. So the need of the hour is to generate data scientists in addition to petrophysicists, geophysicists and geologists, and then they should correlate or corroborate with these functional experts, and then help the geoscientists to make the decisions in the oil industry in a right fashion. I will not repeat this. The concluding thought, you might be knowing that the digital oil field, which has come concept in the oil industry, still it has not touched most of the E&P companies. Although this concept also, when it has come, digital oil field, by putting some sensors, subsurface sensor in the field or the facilities, digital oil field remained up to that level. But later on, the oil and gas industry has the opportunity to capitalize this big data analytics solution, and ultimately to embrace this big data, to align itself with the rapid technology investment, and it's challenging and will require a mindset change. As of date, as I told you that the mindset for the oil industry, whenever you are taking a project, whenever you are discussing any field, first thing is collection of data. Efforts have been made for the depository. Our Mr. Avinash Chandra is sitting here, he is the first Director General of Hydrocarbon. He has given a concept that depository of national depository. That depository means that data should be at one place, and then only anybody can take the decisions. So these are the things which needs to be taken into consideration for rightful decisions. The oil and gas industry has the opportunity to capitalize on this, and many opportunity will open for data scientists as well as for portal for big data applications, and company will have the strategic data and intelligence to train the new application for smarter to produce hydrocarbon, more hydrocarbon, to discover more hydrocarbon and produce more hydrocarbon with better recovery. And big data technologies can help oil and gas industry to take the new business opportunities, reduce the cost, and ultimately reorganize the operations in a fashion which for the business purpose it's economical. The last slide, the oil and gas industry must extensively use this big data dynamic analytics. As I told, it's in the infant stage, and still industry have to embrace. Some other industry have already embraced this big data concept, but oil industry still have to imbibe this technology and this big data concept, and then only through this new software, the middleware and data handling solutions, and then through data manipulation tools, the oil industry can be helpful for a useful information. Thank you very much.